Quantum mechanics. Quantum mechanics, to get real simple, was developed to explain observable facts that indicated that attributes of what was being observed were not fixed but were subject to attributes of the observer. The observer, of course, was some person. Now, this general fact should indicate to you that what you observe to be real is not necessarily real in any absolute sense, although it is real to you. If you wish, both MIT and Cambridge offer free college-level classes in quantum mechanics. The class you want is taught by Alan W. Adams 1, and you can watch it on YouTube 2, or sign up for the course for free at MIT or Cambridge. The conclusion of the mathematical proof given in this class is that the universe we live in is flat. It only appears to be 3D if you are inside of it, which, of course, you are. The math also predicts the existence of at least 15 parallel universes, but there could be more since 15 is the maximum the equations can reliably predict. Now, this finally brings science in line with facts that have always been known in occult circles. Science has just been a slow learner. First, the Earth was the center of the universe. Then, no, it was just a part of some random solar system. And now, finally, it is really part of a 2D flat plane, and scientists finally admit it was created by intelligent design. So, now that science has finally come of age, let's briefly discuss the planes. The planes from the outside appear to be similar to square sheets of, say, plywood, with some thickness. However, once you pierce the surface of any plane, you will find yourself in what appears to be a 3D environment, and you will believe that what you observe is real, and unless you know how to get out, you will believe that what you can observe is all that exists. Of course, there are quite a few planes and they all function basically the same. This is the correct interpretation of the statement attributed to Jesus, "My house has many mansions." Density zones. The created worlds are divided into 5 main density zones. These zones are distinct because of the degree of the fineness, for want of a better word, of the matter. At this point, you may want to review our book, Essentials of Mysticism. It is common to refer to these zones as planes. However, since each zone contains more than one plane, it would be more accurate to refer to the area as a zone where planes using the same matter density can exist. To say, for example, astral plane, is misleading because there are more than one plane, but all of them are in the same density zone, and are constructed of the same stuff, and operate on the same basic principles. An astral body is functional on any of the planes in that zone, but would be limited if it attempted to function in some other density zone. Constructs in density zones. Physical zone. We live in the physical zone. As we discussed, scientists are predicting at least 15 physical planes. However, mystics claim there are many more. Beings inside one of these planes believe it is the universe, and are generally unaware of any other plane in this density zone or that other density zones exist. Advanced civilizations know the truth, however Earth is just catching on, and, unfortunately, this knowledge scares them, resulting in secrecy and elaborate deceptions to protect people from the truth. Astral zone. Essentially every living creature has an astral body. A small percentage of the human population is consciously aware of this and knows how to place their physical body in a sort of stasis condition and travel using their astral body. Everyone can do this, but first, you must be aware that you can. It is to your advantage to know this, because your astral body will generally be your primary body should your physical body die. Scientists burn into evidence of astral bodies all the time and invent all sorts of excuses to explain away observable events. Scientists get upset, for example, with Kirlian photography, which produces a hard image of astral structures. The classic is the phantom leaf experiment, where you cut off part of a leaf, but the Kirlian photo shows it is still there because even plants have an astral body. Astral bodies can function in the physical density zone but are limited. For one thing, no one can see you unless they are psychic. Also, you only have at the most 1 ounce of force available to influence a physical object. Of course, in their natural home, astral bodies function just as well as physical bodies do in the physical density zone. Astral travelers have identified 7 astral planes. They exist in sort of a stack, and there is separation between. As you might guess, planes towards the top of the stack are more desirable. Planes are managed by a plane lord. He operates under direct authority from the creator, so zero, and his authority within his assigned space is absolute and cannot be challenged. The same plane lord supervises both the physical and astral density zones. These areas provide, essentially, basic training for young souls. Souls cannot advance until they master the various constructs and challenges in these zones. One main, stumbling block, for young souls is the fact that the concept of sex really only exists in the 2 lower density zones. As long as you believe you are male or female, you can never rise above these 2 lower density zones. You will simply keep bouncing back and forth lifetime after lifetime until you realize sex is an illusion. Souls have no sex, they are just souls. The concept of sex originates on the lower part of the causal plane. Causal zone. The causal zone contains the power crystals which create and maintain the various constructs in the physical and astral zones. This plane is also known as the plane of forces. It has its own plane lord. His name is generally only revealed to mystic initiates because just knowing it confers a certain level of power. Legitimate magicians access this plane when they practice. Anything you can imagine here can be made to materialize in the physical world. Obviously, this is potentially a highly abusable skill and there are penalties for abuse. If you have ever met a legitimate magician, you may have noticed that they do small tricks, things so insignificant that they will not have meaningful effects upon the creation. They could do more, but they know the consequences. Artificial intelligence devices such as the Montauk Chair, Device 3 can do the same thing. However, this top-secret device is generally used for evil purposes by world governments who, apparently, simply don't care about the consequences of their actions. Mental zone. The mental zone contains the essential seeds of all possible logical constructs. All of these constructs, although different, operate on the same principle. If you are inside of one of these constructs, everything you believe appears to be perfectly correct. You believe that all your questions and doubts have been satisfied and everything is just fine. So do those trapped in any of the other constructs, even though they are totally different. This zone is essentially your final test in the created worlds. You must realize that none of these constructs are real. They are just constructs. Until you can realize this, you will remain trapped in this zone. In this zone, your mental body will be active. In our density, this body has the appearance of a blue orb, assuming you are developed enough to see it. The feature film, The Entity, 4 covers this topic. Etheric zone. The etheric zone is the top of the created worlds. This is the last zone where any remnants of matter, energy, space or time exist. In a grand dissolution, only the upper level of this zone remains. All the other zones cease to exist until the creator, so zero, orders them regenerated. Unless you have a soul, and not everything does, you will cease to exist at this point, dust to dust. Developed souls will enter the spiritual zones and souls who need more experience will go into a state of stasis until the creation regenerates. Souls who reached this level by using what is commonly called the left-hand path cannot enter the spiritual zones no matter how advanced they may be. Spiritual zones. The spiritual zones are eternal zones and not subject to creation or dissolution. So, if you make it there, you are free and need never return to the imperfect created worlds. However, you can elect to voluntarily return to do assignments. Navigation and identification. The created worlds are extremely user-friendly. They are designed to facilitate navigation. Of course, you must be capable and aware of the navigation processes and identification codes. Advanced civilizations know this. However, Earth is still just a novice and those who are aware conceal the information from the general population. In the astral density, for example, each plane is identified in one corner by a schematic of a lotus flower. The number of petals of the lotus identifies the plane. Additionally, each plane is marked with standard Cartesian coordinates like a sheet of graph paper. Of course, this is only visible if you are on the outside of the plane. Once inside, you only see what appears to be a 3D environment. So, to accurately navigate, you must be on the outside. From this perspective, you can specify a destination. You could, for example, say, what we want to visit is astral plane 4 at coordinates 16x30. You can do this without any technology once you master your astral body. The key trick here is to get into free space. Most people find themselves in a sort of whirling cave or tube. However, there are backwards eddies, and if you hop into one of these, you will be outside the tube and in free astral space. From this perspective, you can see all the planes and pick your destination. When you pierce the surface, you are again in a 3D simulation. Since you are using your astral body, you should be able to communicate and interact with whatever you find. All communication is pure telepathic. Only lower plane primitive civilizations use language. Since you are linked to your physical body by the silver cord, you have the right of return, and so you can pop out of the plane you are exploring and return to your physical body at your pleasure. Now, in the physical density zone, you generally need some type of craft to protect your physical body during travels. However, the navigation procedure is basically the same. You don't navigate inside of a plane because it is slow and awkward. What you do is pop out of whatever plane you are in. Now you can see all the planes. Look for the identification markers and location markers and then just drop back in at your destination. This is the basic process. However, in practice, it requires considerable skill and there are certain risks involved. However, travelers from advanced civilizations can generally go wherever they want in very little time. Earth belief constructs. Humans are not the true natives of this planet. 11. Societies of black magicians and mainly the Catholic Church control this place because they have become transdimensional, and exist both in this density and the astral density. The main control strategy is divide and conquer. For example, reportedly, the Catholics created the Masons and then, for plausible deniability, said they would excommunicate Masons. However, the Pope is said to secretly be a Mason. It is well known that priests rape children. However, the human sacrifice rituals are still kept under wraps. In these rituals, kids are said to volunteer to be sacrificed. As part of the bargain, they get to spend 1 year having essentially constant sex with a group of girls or boys if that is their preference. However, once the year is up, they are sacrificed. This, of course, is high-level sex and blood magic. The purpose of the year of sex is to boost their psychic energy level so that, when they are sacrificed, the priests can absorb the maximum amount of psychic energy to boost their black magic powers. Now, this general deception for protection model is common and is used quite effectively in other areas. The US and Russia work closely together setting up colonies on other planets. If you look at the astronauts and cosmonauts of the public space station, you will see they are very friendly and generally form lifetime friendships. However, people are told Russia is a terrible threat as a deception to cover up their true relationship. Actually, in the middle of this so-called Cold War, Russia and the US signed a contract to jointly build a new space station when the present one becomes obsolete. Doesn't really sound like bitter enemies, does it? The US pretends it hates Iran, but, in reality, the US has an ongoing contract with Iran to provide assassins. It is the same scheme over and over. You want to hide the truth in the last place anyone would look. Earth activity zones. It is said, all men are created equal. However, but some men are more equal than others, seems to have somehow gotten lost in translation. The general population zone. The general population zone houses most of humanity. They live in sub-zones called countries. They spend their lives in an artificially maintained stasis. They struggle for survival and there is constant war. The propaganda systems consisting of TV, movies and print media, constantly broadcast stories of war, fear and misery. Diseases many artificially created keep the people scared, dazed and confused. The people toil constantly but never seem to actually get anywhere. They are exploited at every turn. In school, many are forced to take mind-damaging chemical weapons, drugs, so they stay stupid. Next comes some dead-end job where they are utterly miserable but must work for food to survive to do more slave labor the next day. If they die relatively young, they are carved up by medical facilities and sold for spare parts. People in nursing homes whose organs have no use are sold to the cosmetic industry for use in high-end cosmetics. Next time you go to grandma's grave, consider that you have a better chance of finding some of her in some expensive bottle of, say, face cream. Antarctica. Antarctica is one of the more interesting special population zones you will never see. Admiral Byrd wrote about it some time back, describing an inner Earth with an inner sun and friendly inhabitants. It was reportedly first explored in detail by the Nazis using submarines. Below the ice are many complex structures. There are essentially underground continents arranged in a honeycomb matrix. The Nazis accidentally found one that had been abandoned only to learn later that the others were populated. These beings predate the creation of humans and the biblical reference, "There were giants in the earth at that time and also afterward," refers to these beings. Although Antarctica seems inhospitable on its icy surface, it is quite comfy underground. There is a nice underground freshwater lake. Although there is no central sun, everything is illuminated by a green light, most likely caused by some electromagnetic interaction with the rocks. This special light deserves a more detailed explanation. This is the color of the light, L1. This is chromium-3 oxide 5, and it just happens to be the same color of the lamps in Mecca where Muslims go for the Hajj 6. It is also the color of the light given off by lightning bugs, and, recently, exposure to this color of green light was found to relieve pain in medical tests. Also, it is the color you see as you approach Earth upon your return from an interdimensional out-of-body trip. Although humans live here, there is no comparison between their lives and those of the miserable surface population. Actually, they don't know and don't care what happens on the surface. They don't get sick because they have been given immunity to all known diseases. They would not even notice something like WWII on the surface. They watch top secret TV, which is informative and actually broadcasts the truth, and they use the top secret internet, supernet, which is off limits and generally unknown to the ordinary people. They don't use money. Money is a created illusion used to enslave the surface masses. The underground. The US and other developed countries love to create underground hideaways. The underground cities can generally comfortably accommodate about 100,000 people with all possible amenities. So, how do they build these places? Reportedly, the US uses a device about 3 miles long which is completely self-contained. It does not dig through rock and mud, it disintegrates it. There is nothing left to haul away. Everything in its path is vaporized and exhausted as vapor. The area is first cut in a figure-8 pattern and then the finishing work begins. You can imagine the power this device has. Of course, the US has access to and uses all the free energy devices which have been invented and withheld from the general population. However, it also has highly efficient nuclear reactors which produce electricity directly, no boiling water or turbines needed. However, these reactors produce as a byproduct a special isotope of mercury known as red mercury. The government is so terrified people will learn about this that they disseminate the propaganda that this stuff does not exist. It definitely does, however. They are terrified because all you need is a little of this and about a basketball-sized chunk of lithium-6 to make a 20 megaton nuclear bomb, and they desperately hope that no one ever figures out how to do this. Other restricted zones. There are other restricted zones. Area 51, for example, is a classic restricted zone in more or less plain sight. Most is underground. Here, ETs work alongside mainly American and Russian scientists on a variety of projects. UFOs land here frequently and are stored underground. Special, homing signals are transmitted for UFOs to guide them in. Besides Area 51, which is generally known to exist, there are many unknown restricted zones. Many are underground. Also, many are on the floor of oceans. A good feature film dealing with underwater bases is Startup Invasions 9, which was made some years back. You can view the full movie for free here. 10. Essentially, secret restricted zones are located in places where you can't go, like the Moon or Mars, or places where you have been taught to believe are dangerous, like radioactive, tropical islands. The government has known how to neutralize radiation for quite some time, or isolated places in Africa where pygmies with poison darts will get you, and so on. Many visible surface locations look like ordinary office buildings until you realize that 100 or more stories of these buildings are underground, where they connect to an underground transport network linking them to the other restricted places worldwide. Off-world zones. The Moon. The Moon is pretty much totally inhabited. In this epoch, it is said 7 to have been first visited by the Germans in 1920 after they successfully made a working, flying saucer. However, ETs already lived there and the Germans had to negotiate for permission to build a base of their own. Since one side of the Moon Although Antarctica seems inhospitable on its icy surface, it is quite comfy underground. There is a nice underground freshwater lake. Although there is no central sun, everything is illuminated by a green light, most likely caused by some electromagnetic interaction with the rocks. This special light deserves a more detailed explanation. This is the color of the light, L1. This is chromium-3 oxide 5, and it just happens to be the same color of the lamps in Mecca where Muslims go for the Hajj. 6. It is also the color of the light given off by lightning bugs, and, recently, exposure to this color of green light was found to relieve pain in medical tests. Also, it is the color you see as you approach Earth upon your return from an interdimensional out-of-body trip. Although humans live here, there is no comparison between their lives and those of the miserable surface population. Actually, they don't know and don't care what happens on the surface. They don't get sick because they have been given immunity to all known diseases. They would not even notice something like WWII on the surface. They watch top secret TV, which is informative and actually broadcasts the truth, and they use the top secret internet, supernet, which is off limits and generally unknown to the ordinary people. They don't use money. Money is a created illusion used to enslave the surface masses. The underground. The US and other developed countries love to create underground hideaways. The underground cities can generally comfortably accommodate about 100,000 people with all possible amenities. So, how do they build these places? Reportedly, the US uses a device about 3 miles long which is completely self-contained. It does not dig through rock and mud, it disintegrates it. There is nothing left to haul away. Everything in its path is vaporized and exhausted as vapor. The area is first cut in a figure-8 pattern and then the finishing work begins. You can imagine the power this device has. Of course, the US has access to and uses all the free energy devices which have been invented and withheld from the general population. However, it also has highly efficient nuclear reactors which produce electricity directly, no boiling water or turbines needed. However, these reactors produce as a byproduct a special isotope of mercury known as red mercury. The government is so terrified people will learn about this that they disseminate the propaganda that this stuff does not exist. It definitely does, however. They are terrified because all you need is a little of this and about a basketball-sized chunk of lithium-6 to make a 20 megaton nuclear bomb, and they desperately hope that no one ever figures out how to do this. Other restricted zones. There are other restricted zones. Area 51, for example, is a classic restricted zone in more or less plain sight. Most is underground. Here, ETs work alongside mainly American and Russian scientists on a variety of projects. UFOs land here frequently and are stored underground. Special, homing signals, are transmitted for UFOs to guide them in. Besides Area 51, which is generally known to exist, there are many unknown restricted zones. Many are underground. Also, many are on the floor of oceans. A good feature film dealing with underwater bases is Startup Invasions 9, which was made some years back. You can view the full movie for free here. 10. Essentially, secret restricted zones are located in places where you can't go, like the Moon or Mars, or places where you have been taught to believe are dangerous, like radioactive, tropical islands. The government has known how to neutralize radiation for quite some time, or isolated places in Africa where pygmies with poison darts will get you, and so on. Many visible surface locations look like ordinary office buildings until you realize that 100 or more stories of these buildings are underground, where they connect to an underground transport network linking them to the other restricted places worldwide. Off-world zones. The Moon. The Moon is pretty much totally inhabited. In this epoch, it is said 7 to have been first visited by the Germans in 1920 after they successfully made a working, flying saucer. However, ETs already lived there and the Germans had to negotiate for permission to build a base of their own. Since one side of the Moon always faces Earth, it is an ideal place to set up surveillance equipment. The visual surveillance equipment looks like this: 8L1. The size of the honeycombs on the Moon are considerably larger, of course. The photo is of a type of gun sight, but the principle is the same. This was chosen because amateurs are constantly looking at the Moon trying to detect something, and this design would be invisible to them. Structures which might be visible are concealed under styrofoam, mountains, which are light and easily moved when necessary. Mars. Mars is divided into separate zones where colonies exist. People in these colonies are programmed with propaganda which they believe is true. Some are told they can't go home, back to Earth, because it either no longer exists or is uninhabitable due to war or whatever. These appear to be elaborate psychological experiments and are discussed in detail in 7. When humans are publicly sent to Mars using obsolete rockets to get there, they will also end up forming some type of experimental colony and will never know that people from Earth have been going to Mars for years now and can go and come essentially instantly using so-called jump rooms. Non-human zones. Many zones are the property of non-humans who were living here before humans existed. Areas in Antarctica are a good example. It would not be a good idea to try to visit any of these zones unless invited. Before humans were manufactured, the surface of the planet was reserved for animals, birds, reptiles, insects and the like who existed in a symbiotic relationships with the various plants. The soulless ones. It has generally been assumed that humans have souls. However, psychic scans of the planet are showing that perhaps as few as 2% of the humans have souls. The remainder and the majority are the soulless ones, and there is a good bit of literature about this available on the internet if you search using this phrase. There is a school of thought that the Homo Spain was manufactured 11 by beings from elsewhere. Since souls cannot be manufactured, only God can create a soul. These manufactured creatures could not have souls because they are not children of God, but, rather, some type of automotron designed to be used as a slave. However, some of these original creatures were upgraded because the creators found the females desirable and ended up fathering children with them, which upgraded their genetic makeup. The evidence suggests that souls who desire the experience of having a human form choose the host body they desire based upon what experiences they will have if they associate with this particular body. If you look around at the present state of affairs, you may wonder, who would want anything to do with this place? Apparently, very few souls do. Souls have guaranteed rights and are immortal beings. As a soul, however, a soulless creature has about the same rights as a lawnmower. Your dog has more divine rights. Even insects do because, although they do not have individual souls, they operate as a collective under the protection of a group soul. The soulless ones tend to be very intelligent. This is logical because the highest level available to them would be the mental planes. Unfortunately, we rate people based upon intelligence. We do not even talk about spiritual values. Therefore, it is likely that those who do have souls will be subservient to a hierarchy of soulless creatures. Additionally, these creatures are likely to sense something different about those with souls, since they can comprehend spiritual things and, of course, the soulless ones cannot. So, this can lead to a rough life and would explain why many people with souls find their way into various secret societies so that they can enjoy the company of others like themselves. Secrecy, unfortunately, is the only way to securely survive in this environment. Activity bands. Here we will discuss the activity bands active on Earth. Activity bands are zones of similar beliefs and actions which bond life forms and give direction to their existence. 1100 activity band. This is the lowest band, and the people here tend to aimlessly stumble around from day to day, living from hand to mouth. Females in this band are likely to have a child with every guy they happen to burn pee into along the way. Upon death, these are the confused astral forms you will find who don't realize they are dead and seem to be moving in slow motion. They are utterly lost, and these lower astral zones actually have a noticeable foul smell. 2200 activity band. The 2200 band is the industrial band and the main active activity band on Earth. Motivation in this band is the desire to acquire material possessions. People are rated according to their wealth and possessions. They are generally unaware of spiritual matters. Successful occupants of this activity band are almost exclusively sociopaths and psychopaths who have no regard for the feelings or welfare of others. This is the key to their success because they just don't care about anything except getting richer in a material sense. The United States is the best example of the attributes of this band on Earth. Some smaller countries actually care about the welfare of their citizens. Those fortunate enough to live there are the lucky ones. The masters of the 2200 band, which are generally called the top 1%, or sometimes the top 1/100th th. Of 1%, have perfected their skills to the point that they are now forcing previously prosperous members of this band down into the 1100 band as they systematically crush out the so-called middle class, which, in past times, enjoyed a generally pleasant life. Now they find themselves in poverty with no escape. 3100 activity band. The 3100 band is a spiritual band. Those in this band come to realize that material possessions are not the key to true success and happiness. The masters in the 2200 band try their best to prevent evolution into this band with clever deceptions and propaganda. However, once one passes beyond 3108, the grip of propaganda generally cannot pull you back into the 2200 band. 4100 activity band. The 4100 band is an advanced spiritual band. There is almost no observable activity in this band on Earth, although it is highly active on more advanced planets. Groups operating in this band are either deep underground or in inaccessible places like, for example, caves in the Himalayan mountains. They do not wish to be found or to associate with ordinary humans on this planet. There are higher activity bands, but there is no activity in these bands on Earth. Some strange coincides. Activity band codes are standard codes used by administrators. However, you would not expect a primitive planet like Earth to know them. There is, however, some indication that they do. If you are working 2200 band and a government check is deposited into your account, it will be identified as U.S. Treasury 220. However, if you are retired left 2200 band, your Social Security deposit will have the ID, U.S. Treasury 310 inches. Also, the telephone area code for Washington, D.C., which is the center of the 2200 band on Earth, is 202, but next door in Maryland the area code is 301. These are, at least, interesting coincidences. All access procedures. For complete access to the created worlds and conditional access to the spiritual worlds, you will need to learn how to travel as a naked soul. This will allow you to visit and observe all activities on all planes in the created worlds and, assuming you developed on the right-hand path, access to the spiritual planes as well. Although you can observe, should you want to actually interact with the creatures you encounter, you will need to acquire a body compatible with the density zone you are observing. Otherwise, you would be invisible to the natives. Traveling as only a mental body will give you access to essentially all areas within the created worlds. Mental bodies cannot cross the barrier which leads to the spiritual worlds. Astral travel using your astral body limits you to the astral planes. Most people stop here because they believe their astral body is their real body. This, of course, is a serious mistake. Most Earth humans believe that their physical body is all they are. When they die, of course, they find themselves in their astral body and believe that wherever they end up is heaven. It apparently does not occur to them, now that they know it was a mistake to believe that all they were was a physical body, that their astral body is just as much an illusion as the physical body they have now lost. Many people who are competent to teach astral projection have no idea that the causal plane exists. Astral bodies cannot enter the causal plane. They are limited to the astral planes. To enter the causal plane, you must abandon your astral body just as you did your physical body and switch to a finer body which is compatible with the causal density zone. Very few of these astral masters ever figure this out. Astral projection can be fun, however, unless you can figure out how to cross the causal region, you are guaranteed to be locked into the cycle of reincarnation, death, reincarnation, essentially forever. And, remember, you are nowhere near legitimate heaven which exists outside the creation. Diplomatic zones. Diplomatic zones are areas where ETs are free to mingle with Earth diplomats to negotiate treaties. Earth diplomats want technology. However, any technology that Earth has would be of no value to an advanced culture since they have likely had these toys for millions of years. So, Earth has to think of something to trade. Since the secret ruling elite could not care less about the general human population, one item available for trade is people. They can be used as a disposable slave labor force for genetic experiments or for breeding stock, as was done with Africans when slavery was legal. There are likely quite a few other uses too. The Moon is the main diplomatic zone. Antarctica is a close secondary zone. Although ETs are pretty much free to wander about in all of the areas off limits to the herd of ordinary humans, these are said to be the main zones. 7. Dual world structure. As we have discussed in other books, the Earth is basically a dual world. There are essentially two planets in the same space. The slave class. The slave class consists of the general population. The world they perceive to be true is totally fabricated so as to keep them stupid, uninformed and generally harmless, so the elites in the ruling class can handle them easily. Essentially everything they know is false. History taught to the general public has always been doctored, even before the United States even officially existed. Obviously, you know the classic story of the Boston Tea Party. It did happen, but the real reason was that intel was obtained that one of the bales of tea contained a leather pouch with the identities of covert British agents operating in the colonies. They cut the bales until they found the pouch and, of course, the agents were neutralized. Find that in an ordinary history book. They believe the only way to go into space is on top of a rocket. Working, flying saucers were developed by the Germans in 1927. Because they believe this, they feel it is impossible to ever travel in space and so are content to just stay home. They see and use airplanes. Of course they have been obsolete for years but are still manufactured to reinforce the illusion. They are slaves to an imaginary force called money, which does not actually exist. It is only real for people who believe in it. Money manipulators can easily cause money to appear or disappear at will. All of the material things you covet have been obsolete for years. Most of the electronic devices you use are dual use and learn more from you than you learn from them. Radio frequency devices are obsolete. The elites. The elites walk among you, but their world has no resemblance to yours. They don't communicate with standard radio waves. They use scalar waves which are independent of time and provide instant communications anywhere in the universe. Curious? Just search scalar waves on YouTube. They have full access to the supernet, top secret internet, and to the top secret TV network. They would never waste their time watching the garbage you see on your TV. Selected elites can purchase and use their very own flying saucer. The blueprints I was shown in the 1960s showed a storage facility which could best be described as a high-rise parking garage with no walls. These small craft 25 to 35 feet across use anti-gravity and make no noise. Generally designed to hold two people comfortably, they can pretty much go anywhere. I was told they cost about $1 million each, however that was in $1,960. Elites don't use money. Slaves like you provide for their needs. Elites know of and are free to associate with ETs. Since many can pass for ordinary humans, they frequently entertain them in their homes. Free energy in any quantity needed is available to them. They have been given immunity to all known diseases and so stay in perfect health. They live, forever, by transferring their consciousness to a clone when the time comes. This is the real world. Unfortunately, you will never see it. Dissolution. We have covered the issue of dissolution before. The creation has only one purpose. That purpose is to foster the development of young souls so that they will acquire wisdom and maturity sufficient to allow them to return to their Creator. Everything except souls is unreal and is a created illusion designed to accomplish this objective. Eventually, the creation degrades to the point that its primary objective is not being accomplished. At this point, it must be dissolved and recreated. There are two types of dissolution: minor and grand. A minor dissolution erases the two lower densities, the physical and astral densities. These are much more frequent than the grand dissolution, which erases everything except the very top of the etheric zone. Only souls survive a grand dissolution. Everything else, which would include the soulless one, ceases to exist and will not be regenerated when the creation is eventually reset. It is said among the mystics that the period during which the created worlds exist day, and the period during which it does not exist night, constitutes one day in the life of God.